Hi, I'm Gareth Kane, and welcome to the Net Zero Business Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Duncan Peake, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Raby Estates, who's going to talk to us about land management. So, welcome to the podcast, Duncan.
Delighted to be here, Gareth. Nice to meet you online.
Fantastic. Now, we'd like to start by asking a bit of sort of a history for our guests' personal history. So, how did you first get involved in estate management?
Well, it was a long time ago, Gareth, but I was raised in industrial northwest Lancashire. Um, Both my parents were in industry, but as a family, we spent a lot of time in the hills of the northwest of England, and I fell in love with the countryside. I spent a lot of my teenage years working on farms, but we were never in a position to acquire our own farm. So I decided to be try and become a land manager, and that's I attended the Royal Agricultural College. It's now the Royal Agricultural University. Graduated from there and got my first job on the North York Moors. And I've stayed in land management ever since, working on private family estates. And 9 years ago now, I joined Lord Barnard here at, uh, at Raby. I should say I've never for one moment regretted the career path I chose. It's been the most fantastic career. It's given me some real highlights and a great joy. I would recommend it to anybody who's thinking about a career who may be listening.
Do you have any jobs going at this stage? Those watching a video will see the wonderful the splendor of Raby Castle on your backdrop. Obviously the estate has some history. Could you give us a potted history?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, Raby goes back nearly 1,000 years. I mean, it was there's mention of Raby in the Domesday Book. It was a manor that was owned by King Canute in the 11th century. But really, the castle that you see behind me was largely built in the 14th century by the Neville family, who were one of the great families of the north of England. They then rebelled against Elizabeth the First in 1569. The Rising of the North took place at Raby Castle. It was a complete flop. The Neville family were attainted, and they lost the estates to the crown. And in the early 17th century, and about the 1620s, the estate was acquired by the Vane family. Henry Vane, the elder, who was a chancellor with Charles I, acquired Raby, and it's been held by the Vane family ever since. So, my principal is Lord Barnard, and he's the 12th Lord Barnard.
Right. An illustrious history. Perhaps you could then tell us about the current operations. What does the Raby estate consist of?
Yeah, well, we're quite diverse. We have three major land holdings. Two of those major land holdings are in County Durham in Teesdale. One is around Raby Castle, and the other is in Upper Teesdale. So Middleton and Teesdale up to the Cumbrian border, and it's everything sort of north of the River Tees up to the watershed with Weardale. And then we have another estate between Telford and Shrewsbury in Shropshire.
Hmm. And what do you see in terms of managing all that land as the big sustainability issues?
Yeah, well, I would just what I should have mentioned is or outlined is our operations because it's quite varied and the different operations bring different challenges. So we're into we farm in hand quite extensively. We have a growing leisure and tourism operation. We have extensive woodlands, so forestry. Property development is something we do quite a bit of. We build houses, and we have a number of let properties, whether it's let residential or let farms, across our land holdings. We take our obligations to provide a first. Well, a lot of tenant farm. We've got a lot of farms that are let, and some of them are quite modest in size, some of them are quite extensive, but we're quite conscious of our obligations to provide a first rung on the ladder for young farmers trying to get a farm tenancy for the first time. So because there aren't many opportunities for new young farmers to get into farming these days. So we take that responsibility quite seriously.
Yeah. And when I was on your website having a look, you talk about regenerative farming, just to pick up on the farming theme there. What sort of practices are you implementing that would be different from traditional farming?
Yeah, well, regenerative farming is all about improving the health of our soils while continuing to obviously to produce food. I think I remember when I was at college and we you were trained and it was all about how much fertilizer, use of the plow, maximizing outputs from the land without necessarily thinking too much about the health of the soil and the inputs. So we're now going back to what essentially was a pre-war practice of looking after the soil, minimum cultivations, retaining, keeping the soil covered so it's not exposed and soil erosion is not an issue. Integrating our cropping and livestock and using fewer artificial fertilizers and pesticides. So if the soil is healthy, it will produce healthier crops, which are less reliant on artificial inputs. So that's really our approach. It builds a bit particularly important given the way the climate is changing, and we're seeing more and more weather events, whether that's intense rain or it's periods of drought as we saw this year. A healthier soil gives your business more resilience. And that's so we're doing it because we want a healthier soil, of course, but we think regenerative farming is the way to go because it will help us meet some of the challenges around climate change that we're now facing.
Yeah. And have you had to sort of compromise on crop yields or anything like that as part of?
Yeah, I mean, not to a huge degree. I mean, when we first embarked upon this path, we always thought there would be a sort of a drop in yield before we saw an uptick after a few years as the soil began to regenerate itself. But actually, it's not been too bad. We haven't seen a great drop in yields, and in fact, given if you look at the challenges we faced for 2025 harvest, which were largely around drought, a lack of rainfall, Um, our crops did relatively well. Our yields were not as badly impacted as a lot of our neighbours who remain, who still farm conventionally, and we put that down to healthier soils, better water retention in our soils, and so on. So yeah, it's it's been an interesting journey, but the challenges that we faced have not been as great as those that we anticipated.
Right, excellent. And I suppose, summarizing that, I suppose you're getting some resilience to extreme weather by pursuing this. So um, there are long-term upsides to the practice.
We certainly hope so. And we no, we believe in it. I think it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how far regenerative agriculture develops. But it fits well with our system and our broader values around stewardship of the land and stewardship of the estate.
Yeah. Is there any sort of change management issues, persuading people, whether they're employees or tenant farmers, to adopt these practices if they've have been, in their career been brought up with a different way of working?
We haven't. I mean, our I have to say our own staff adapted to it very well indeed.
Mm.
And It sort of when we started in earnest. I mean, we had there's a couple of our farm workers have retired a couple of years ago, and they've been farming conventionally for. And they've been employed by for 40 odd years, and we thought it would be difficult persuading them to change and use the plough rather less and adopt different practices. But they changed with alacrity. It was something new. It was something interesting and exciting for them,
Mm.
and they adapted well. They've since retired. We've had new replacement staff come in, younger generation, and they've really embraced it. So again, the change management there was not too challenging. I think the biggest challenges we have. Are weather I've already mentioned, but we've had to invest you know in the sort of the kit you need for regenerative farming, and that was a significant financial commitment for us, but one that we were happy to take on given the perceived long-term benefits for the farm.
Fantastic. You mentioned Upper Teesdale. I go hiking there occasionally, but obviously it's a lot of peat moorland, and the role of peat in the carbon cycle is often debated. Do you have an approach to managing the
We
upland?
we do. I mean, we we have. I mean, we have a good deal of degraded peat,
Mm.
and that is as a result of post-war practices, where farmers were encouraged to drain. There were
Mhm.
grants for draining and so on. And I think there's and that has resulted in degradation of the peat. So there's a lot of work going on now for around peatland restoration.
Mm.
I have to say, I think Raby was one of the first adopters of it, because peat grip blocking, so the grips that were created to drain the peatland, we've been blocking those grips probably for about 30 years, actually. But
So I would call that a drainage channel.
Yes,
So
a
just to
drainage, a
explain
grip,
for
yeah,
anybody who doesn't know what, because
yeah.
it's a new
Um,
phrase to me. Yeah.
but we've now, in recent years, with the help of North Pennines National Landscapes and the Yorkshire Peat Partnership, we have really ramped up our peatland restoration, and we've restored probably about 350 hectares of um, peatland on the tops between Upper Teesdale and Weardale. So yeah, very proud of that, and we hope to do more.
And is there any conflict between that and grouse shooting or whatever, or the two
Not
compatible?
really. No, not really. The two are eminently compatible. So I think the challenge around peatland restoration is more around, rather than grouse, is more about the level of grazing by sheep. So that needs to be very carefully managed, and because all the peatlands that we have restored are in protected landscapes and designated. So protected landscape is the national landscape, the former area of outstanding natural beauty, but they're also designated landscapes, triple SIs, and we need to. So through the agreements we have with Natural England, we're able to work with the farmers, the tenant farmers in Upper Teesdale, to manage grazing levels to protect the peat.
Hmm. Yeah. And you got the Green Tourism Award in 2024.
Mhm.
What was that awarded for? Or perhaps you could explain how that works.
Yeah, well, it's I mean, green tourism, is all about again, sort of practical actions to improve enhance your carbon footprint and recycle wherever possible. So there's a whole host of actions that we're undertaking, whether it's from recyclable cups or it's the way we process our waste, the way we garden. All those things it's all about the detail. We were very fortunate to get awarded a silver for that. It's something that I think our customers expect to see. I think the nature of the organization, and which is, our values are set by the family. We're not an organization that likes to virtue signal. We're on a journey around sustainability generally, and we have a long way to go before we get to where we need to be in terms of sustainability generally. But we have a sustainability plan, and that's something we work on every year. It forms an integral part of our overall business planning.
Yeah. So maybe I'll ask about the plan in a little bit more detail in a sec. But just before we move on from the Green Tourism Award, you say your customers expect it. Do you feel that that's sort of getting an award like that is added value, or is it does it sort of cover the bare minimum that people want to see when they're making holiday decisions?
I
How
think, yeah, I think it sets a standard in terms of, but we don't use it as a badge so much as a benchmark. We use it more as a benchmark to and a way of obtaining advice and understanding best practice elsewhere in the industry. So it's used for those purposes really, but when people turn up at Raby Castle and they want to know, they want to understand how the estate operates, and how we're asked questions about around how sustainable our business is and what we're doing to play our part in managing climate change. And we can point, as well as the work that we're doing within the leisure and tourism business, we can talk about regenerative farming. We can talk about the peatland restoration, but we can also talk about work we're doing around biodiversity net gain and some of the agri-environment schemes that we've entered into, as well as conservation work generally that we're undertaking on the estate.
Yeah. Well, maybe we should go for the strategy first, and then dig into some of those issues as well. What are sort of the headline objectives of your strategy?
Well, I think we want to minimize our impact, and that that covers waste. So recycling as much as we can, um, rather than stuff going into landfill. We're looking at composting. We haven't got a composting arrangement at the moment, but it's certainly there in our business plan. Um, we want to reduce our carbon footprint for every department. We've still a long way to go on that. We haven't set a target for net zero as a business, but we have done quite a bit of work on benchmarking where we are at the moment. And each year, as we review our business plan, we look at ways to reduce um, our carbon footprint further. We're also looking at other impacts we have on the environment, whether it's air quality, it's water, and the soil health, which we've already talked about. One area I'm really interested in, and again, it's work in progress, is can we do more around the circular economy? So, stuff that we produce, instead of just selling it off to can we use it to recycle some of the timber that we produce, for example? A lot of that timber was used in the rising project that has just been delivered at Raby Castle. So there are all sorts of opportunities for us to look at those areas, and most of the ideas, they don't come from me; they come from people elsewhere in the business who are who are closer to stuff on the ground than me. But so it's a really exciting area of work for us.
Yeah, so it sounds like this is something your team are engaging with proactively rather than being told what to do. Would that be a good way of putting it?
Well, actually, that cuts to how we manage the business.
Yeah.
My job as chief executive is not to take all the decisions. What my job as chief executive is to create an environment where ideas can flourish, and we encourage that. The whole business plan process is a very bottom up approach to managing our organization. So people are encouraged to come up with ideas and have a sense of ownership of how their part of the business is operating.
Yeah. Yeah, and then sort of picking up on some of those other things you mentioned in passing, biodiversity net gain, which for anybody from overseas or who doesn't know, is the rule in developments that you have to prove that after development you've increased biodiversity by 10% either on site
Yep.
or by buying credits of somebody who can use that cash to develop biodiversity. So how do you fit into the biodiversity net gain process?
Well, we as part of the Rising project, for those of your listeners who don't know, the Rising project at Raby Castle was the repurposing and regeneration of a lot of historic buildings at Raby Castle that were in meanwhile use. The public had no access to them, so we invested a significant amount of money in opening up those buildings and creating almost a new visitor attraction at Raby, which is known as the Rising. The part of the funding for that development was through enabling housing development elsewhere in Teesdale, and those housing developments were the first developments in County Durham to have a biodiversity net gain requirement. So are actually in the process of delivering biodiversity net gain on sites that we are developing ourselves.
Yeah.
So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is that having had some experience in delivering biodiversity net gain on our own sites, we are now looking at areas of land, and they're mostly sort of, well, not marginal area, but they're if they're arable land it's areas of low productivity. Um, but we are looking at opportunities to engage with natural capital markets in order to sell biodiversity net gain units into that market to enable development to take place elsewhere in the northeast and beyond.
Yeah. And we've mentioned the rising a few times. I didn't even look up to see what the actual theme of it is as a visitor attraction. I suppose my geeky mind latched onto the geothermal energy potential for it. So perhaps you could introduce the rising in more detail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's first of all, I'd recommend anybody who hasn't visited the Reich, come and see us. I hope we will be able to give you a good day. But Raby Castle was when Lord Barnard inherited Raby Estates in 2016. And at that time, I think it's fair to say Raby was quite a private estate. Lord Barnard wanted to open up Raby Castle and the wider estate to so there's more engaged with the local economy and the local community. So one of the first things we did in 2017 was we removed the kiosk at the entrance to Raby Park so that people could come into Raby Park and enjoy our food and beverage outlets, our retail, and part of the park without going beyond the pay line. So our visitor numbers jumped up as a result of that. But the facilities that we had at that time were clearly were inadequate for the expectations of today's visitors. Coupled with that, we had these very historic buildings which were closed to the public, and there was clearly an opportunity to invest in those buildings, create a visitor attraction of a completely different scale to the north of the castle, and that's essentially what we've done. So there is now a significant area of children's adventure play. There is a new remodeled car park. We have a new 220 cover restaurant. We have event space, a new visitor building, an extended retail operation and exhibition space. And then on top of that, we have a completely redesigned walled garden at Raby, which all serve to complement Raby Castle itself. So I suppose, if you came to Raby 5 or 6 years ago, you'd have probably spent a couple of hours here and then gone away. And now there's an opportunity to spend a whole day and a whole day with the family, because we've got the attractions now that appeal to people of every age. So it's been great. We've the first 12 months. I mean, when Lord Barnard took over, we had around 40,000 visitors a year. So that was back in 2016. The first 12 months, we opened in June 24, and the figures for June 24 to June 25, we attracted 300,000 visitors. So we're now, I would say, I'd like to think we're a significant visitor attraction in County Durham, adding to the wider visitor economy, which is so important for the county and the wider northeast.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the geothermals.
Yeah, we took a geothermal. We had an old there's a building, a historic building, and this is all part of the regeneration. Old historic redundant building, which we call the gas house, and it was where the gas was processed to in the old days, Victorian times, to heat the castle. Obviously, that was then replaced by mains gas, and so when we looked at the rising, we took the opportunity to investigate whether we could introduce a geothermal
Mhm.
ground source, and initial investigations suggested it was possible. So we took the risk and drilled some holes in the ground and found what we needed to find, and we've invested in that geothermal operation, ground source operation. It should reduce. We anticipate when it's all fully up and running, for it to reduce our energy bills quite significantly, as well as our carbon footprint. And yeah, so it's been a exciting, if not challenging, area for us. I think the first thing there's the cost. It was significantly more expensive to provide, to go for the geothermal than have just gone for the extending the mains gas. But we're still seeing the results of the geothermal, the ground source, but we anticipate that there will be significant reductions going forward, and there's also the opportunity to extend it to the castle itself in due
Yeah,
course.
yeah, because of course, castle's quite difficult to decarbonize. They, they, they weren't they weren't built for energy efficiency, really. Were they?
Certainly weren't. No, that's true. I mean, heritage buildings themselves are a real challenge, particularly if you're looking at retrofitting. In our case, because we were able, we had to go really, do a lot of interventions in the buildings that we've restored. We were able to incorporate a lot of additional insulation into the buildings that which are now open to the public. So yeah,
Were they listed buildings or did they?
all listed. Yeah, there was the there's a John Carr barn, which is grade 2 star, a riding school, which is grade 2, and then there's a coach house, which is grade 2 star as well.
Yeah.
So, but the new Vinery Cafe was a new build, and the new visitor building was a new build. But both those buildings replicated buildings that have been there previously or elsewhere on the estate.
Yeah, but obviously that I think the various heritage bodies are a little bit more understanding now than they were 10 or 20 years ago on retrofitting. It used to be very strict. But what challenges did you find in regenerating those buildings?
Well, the as far as the local planning authority was concerned, and Historic England, we received huge support. I think you're right. The mindset has changed in terms of the approach of the conservation authorities. They now recognise that it is more important to find future uses for these buildings, and incorporate energy efficiency or regenerative means of energy, rather than being purist about in the way that they used to be. So, I mean, part of the overall restoration, as part of the enabling arrangement we had with the local planning authority, Gainford Hall in Gainford, which is another grade 1 listed building, was restored, and we had conversations about fitting solar panels to the roof of Gainford Hall, which is a grade 1 listed building, and they were minded to give consent for that. In the end, we didn't do it because it was cost prohibitive, but and it would have been difficult to incorporate into the historic fabric, but had we wished to pursue it, the Historic England and the local planning authority would have been supportive.
Yeah. Fantastic. I think we've covered an awful lot of ground, but I suppose to finish up, and you've hinted at some of this, but what's next for the estate? What are your what's in the pipeline in
Well,
sustainable estate?
in terms of sustainability,
Yeah.
I think do you know there's not one big project. I think it's just for us because of the diversity of our operation. It's finding ways to of progressing things. Um, you know, each year. So it's very much a journey for us, and sustainability is not just about carbon and renewables and so on. It's also about how you treat your staff, how you engage with the local community, employment, and all those sort of things. So we like to think that we're making progress on all those areas. But is there one silver bullet? No, I don't think there is. I think we just got to, as a business, we've just got to keep on persevering. And as we go forward, if we're if we're asked, then we'll tell our story.
Brilliant. Okay, Duncan, thanks so much for that. I think that was a fascinating romp through a huge number of issues, as I said before, from farming, upland land management, regenerating listed buildings, and the sort of intricacies of green tourism. So it just leaves me to thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you, Gareth. Nice to meet you.